Paul Beatty is the first American to win the Booker Prize. His book, The Sellout, has been variously described as cutting satire. He's been called a comic genius. But at its heart, the book is an unflinching look at American society today. Paul Beatty, thank you very much for talking to Outlook. A brand new president has been sworn in your country, and you're here in India, some 15,000 miles away.
It feels good, actually. Yeah. I mean, one of the things is, I shouldn't be surprised, but I get surprised is just how knowledgeable non-Americans are about, American current events. And so that's always interesting, because being there, you kind of lose track because everything's so American-centric. So that's always interesting for me. And I'm glad I'm not there in a weird way. I mean, it's like some pretend distance from the process. But, even though I'm actually, 15,000 miles away, but, here I'm still there, in my head. But it's really nice not to be there. Yeah. And I'm not a person, it's not like when Obama was elected, I was like, yeah, I have to be there. But this is, this groundswell of things that have been happening a long time, And so it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even talk about because there's nothing there. It's interesting to see this almost an American apparition, take this job. Like it's not even there in a weird way. But then, of course, the consequences can be very real, Yeah.
When one reads the book, it seems like a reaction to what has been going on in America recently. The divisive presidential campaign. But obviously, you've been writing it for a long time.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to say like good books do this, but there are so many good books that always feel timely. If I read Candide again, which I haven't read, but I'm sure it'll feel timely. I'm reading this, this G.K. Chesterton book, and it feels very timely. And it's the thing of how do you touch on the timeless stuff, that like times do change, things, events happen, but there's something about, the human condition that's always very timeless. And like when a book touches that, because, hopefully this book 10 years from now, 50 years from now, will somehow feel very timeless, but I think good art does that, hopefully, and so in a sense, because it's interesting, because some people think that I just spat the book out really quick. No, I'm writing about things that have been going on for a long time, historical, emotional, mental, and that stuff doesn't change. The framework and the context of that stuff changes, but those emotions, those things, and the language, how we frame this stuff, the context changes, but the writing, the artistic part of it is the stuff that, holds everything together.
The Sellout has been, described as a satire, but in the end, at its heart, it's actually a very harrowing, look at American society today, especially race relations, isn't it?
No, that's just how I write. It's not like I write trying to be funny. It's just how I write. It's how I see the world. I'm a cynic, and so that's what comes out, So the humor isn't that. I mean, the humor, for me, is just not a device, but it's how I interpret, And it's not something I try to force. I don't really think of myself as a funny person necessarily, but it's how I write. And one of the things is like when people say the book's satirical, I kind of do this, but if somebody says, oh, it's a funny novel or a comic novel, that doesn't bother me, And I think, I don't know what will happen, but one of the problems, I was talking earlier about the satire label, and one of the problems is it can feel very, can be tied to a certain place and time, that thing, And so I'm trying to avoid that trap, and not let anybody push me into that trap. But just the humor is a part of it. And so when I first started writing, one of the things that was interesting to me is I was reading at the time like a lot of sort of political fiction and nonfiction, I guess. And I was like, God, there's no humor in this, Absolutely. And it was interesting to me. I was like, yeah, I hear people talk about this, even people who are involved in these, who are activists. They talk about with a sense of humor, but at some level when they put pen to paper, there's this thing, and there's, for me, I don't want to say false necessarily, but for me, it's not the way that I wanted to have the conversation.
Do you think this divisive tone that Mr. Trump has been using is actually only a rhetoric, and now that he's on the high seat, the system will kick in, the checks and balances of the system?
Yeah, there's a trust there's a trust in the system, even though the system is, I guess when I was in my early 20s, I started to read all these anarchists, Kropotkin and Bakunin, and they talk about, how everything is imaginary. It's all kind of metaphysics in a weird way. Money, the state, none of it's real to that, to whatever extent. And there's an interesting thing that this is almost starting to play out in a weird way, because the smoke and mirrors, the decorum, all the things that keep these things in place are starting to I don't want to say deteriorate, because that's not the thing, but there's just a boldness about things that's very scary. So, yeah, Obama's, it's his job is to say, yeah, we're here. This was a peaceful transition. My transition was peaceful, and that's his job, and he's right. It is but you don't know what's going to happen, and there's a thing of, some people feel emboldened to do certain things, and to do things that, I think are completely self-destructive, but that's just my opinion. I don't know what's going to happen. One of the things that's interesting is how forceful he is with the press, and how quick he is to just push them aside. And it was interesting. I spent some time in Italy, and we were talking about this. And they keep citing, I'm reading all these left-wing papers. And so one of the things in the States is, while there's left-wing media, not many people are aware of it, and it doesn't have the voice. You just have this kind of media that more or less is all the same, kind of trumpet. It's interesting. So I don't know what I'm saying here, but the media thing is very scary about the censorship,
After years of affirmative action, sensitizing people about African Americans, why is there so much turmoil on the ground still?
I think, I was reading this story about these 8 guys, these 8 billionaires, whose combined wealth is more than half the world's population, right? That's 3 billion people versus 8. And then whether this is true, the article cited that, in many places, India, Africa, there are places in the world where in terms of nutritional sustenance, people are worse off now than they were 500 years ago. So what does this mean? What is this progress in tech? You know what I'm saying here? And it's this idea, we buy into this notion, we have cars, we have all this, life is better.
Yeah.
It's for who? The world's a big place. And so,
absolutely.
yeah, so these things about how we think about progress are always in my head. And that's why I'm always at a distance. I'm not quite ready to embrace this because I don't know what it means. And it's so easy.
Yeah, because frankly, this blind growth is really a cancer cell's, mantra, as somebody said. It's just, what is this to grow?
And it's this thing of, whether I know that they're out there or not. Excuse me. But so many people are getting left behind. And just look, I'm in a nation that, I don't know, we use some insane amount of the world's resources, for this small percentage, this thing. And look, I'm a beneficiary of that.
Yeah.
But, and so I haven't quite figured out how to do all that. And I'm not a person who's an activist. I'm not a person who likes joining groups. So I just write.
Yeah. You're extremely scathing about Hollywood in your book, the stereotyping of African Americans. Obviously, the book is not going to be made into a film.
Some people would argue that, or
even that.
No. There's a guy, I don't know if you're going to know who I'm talking about, but he was, at one point, he was the most popular black actor, very highly paid. His name was Stepin Fetchit.
Yes.
So Stepin Fetchit, his servile manner, he can't speak, he's slow, he's dumb, he's stupid. And I heard a writer, Mary Baraka, Leroy Jones, was giving a reading and just started talking about Stepin Fetchit in the middle of his thing. And he was talking about how Stepin Fetchit would be in the movies and that somebody would tell him, go pick up that bucket 40 feet away. But it would take him 25 minutes to go get it. And he goes, only the real servile, the real person, the real sellout is going to run to get the bucket. So part of Stepin Fetchit's trying to protect himself is moving so slowly, trying to give him some freedom. When he said that, I just, man.
Amazing.
and Baraka was so smart. But there's a thing, there's so much nuance and subtlety that we don't see, you know, because we don't get taught to see, like...
It's such easy stereotyping, and I mean, it's ridiculous sort of, stereotyping. Yeah?
Absolutely, and the stereotypes come from all different kind of places, you know? And so one of the things that's interesting in the States is there's a ton of Asian stereotyping in the media.
Yeah.
But it's not important to them because there's no guilt about it. You know, there's some mainstream guilt about black people, a little bit about Native Americans, but, you know, about the world's Asian population and some other, you know, and it's interesting how no one picks up on that. No one cares. It's just all funny, which it might be funny. But no one talks about, like, hey, how come we do this with these people and don't do this with these people anymore?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So it's interesting.
Yeah.